Hello and welcome to the Media Play News Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Parkman.
And I'm co-host Charlie Sholey.
This episode, we're going to unpack James Gunn's announcement for the first set of DC properties he'll be developing as the studio's new creative co-lead. And Charlie's going to bring us another interview, this time with director Jim, who directed the documentary Children of the Mist. And we'll round out the episode with an update on Netflix's new password sharing policy, assuming that, they still have one. Spoiler alert, their announcement did not go well. But let's go jump on the last week. What'd you watch, dude?
So, like I promised, I have delivered. I finished Copenhagen Cowboy by the director Nicholas Winding Refn. Now I know the pronunciation of his name. And then I also saw Children of the Mist, documentary that covers this practice among a ethnic group in northern Vietnam of bridal kidnapping. It sounds really bad. And then as you watch the movie, you start to think maybe it's not so bad. And then by the time you finish the movie, you're like, no, this is pretty bad. But we'll get more into that once we get to the interview in the middle of the episode. Copenhagen Cowboy, though. So I can't recommend it, at least not as a traditional show. This is on Netflix, by the way. Why can't I recommend it the same way I would recommend something like The Last of Us, which we've been talking about the last few weeks? Copenhagen Cowboy is much more experimental and kind of dreamlike as you watch it. If you've ever seen anything by David Lynch, this is a similar type of vibe for a show. And honestly, it's the kind of thing that I imagine people who like going to museums and just stand around silently appreciating art do. I myself am not a museum goer, but this is like the TV equivalent of that, where I'm watching this show and nothing about it is really like good traditionally, but I can't stop watching it. And it's so different from anything else you see that it's hard not to kind of like get drawn in. Kind of like a high level summary of what's going on. It follows a girl, Miu, who's the titular cowboy, and the adventures she gets into with different crime elements around Denmark. I was watching kind of a making of that was also on Netflix, and they brought up an interesting point where, first off, it's a very female-centric show, to the point where the director brought on, I think, exclusively female writers to kind of craft what was going on. And they pointed out how a typical cowboy character, if you think back to Westerns like Clint Eastwood type of stuff, Fistful of Dollars, he's just a nameless protagonist who rolls into a town and gets into all sorts of wacky adventures with the townspeople, but his backstory isn't really explained. And that's never really like a problem for someone watching it. You just sort of expect it. But if you have a female in the same type of role, you kind of have this psychological need to wonder about what her whole deal is. And the fact that they never quite explain it is like simultaneously like satisfying and also infuriating. So crime elements in Denmark, there's a few episodes with a brothel. There's another few episodes with a Chinese restaurant that seems to be a front for the Chinese triad. There's drug dealers in Copenhagen and so on, which sounds pretty normal. But then there's also supernatural elements, since Miu seems to be someone who grants luck to anyone and anyone she's around.
Okay.
She may or may not be an alien or being from another dimension. There's an affluent family she runs into at one point who seem to be vampires, but they never confirm or deny what their situation is. There's dream walking, there's hypnosis, there's psychic powers. Everything's very open to interpretation. And in this behind the scenes, again, Nicholas Winding Refn, he speaks just like the characters in his movies and shows. And he says with a completely straight face, like to the point where I almost missed it, that he regularly communicates with extraterrestrials for guidance on each of his projects.
I'm into it.
Yeah, so it's really, really weird, and it's definitely not for everyone, but it's just really cool that Netflix kind of like allocates a budget to produce art house stuff like this. My one complaint is that it unexpectedly ends on a cliffhanger as though they're going to make more of it. Yeah. And there is a 0% chance they're greenlighting this for another season. But yeah, that was really cool. It was an experience. So, I mean, just like I've recommended with his Amazon show, Too Old to Die Young, just watch the first episode and that'll kind of like give you a sense of what type of show it is. All his stuff looks very cool. He's very creative with kind of how he shoots things. Another fun element is that lots of his shots look like they're doctored with like CGI, but he's actually pretty clever with how he uses like different colored lights, kind of like shining on the actors in camera. So lots of the stuff that looks like they're doing some CGI trickery is in camera filming. So not many other filmmakers like him. I'm into it. But like I said before, it's not the type of show you can binge either. You kind of have to watch an episode and then sit back for a couple days and think, what the hell did I just watch? What am I doing with my time?
Yeah, take some time to digest it.
Yeah. So that's what I was concentrating all my attention on. But what about you?
Well, I did watch the first episode, like I said I would, of The Last of Us. And then the rest of the week kind of got away from me. So I haven't actually caught up. I do have episodes 2, 3, and now 4, I guess. Because, yeah, yesterday there would have been a new episode. So I do have 3 episodes to catch up on. I'll do my best to try to get those in this week. So I'm caught up for next week. And we can have a longer discussion about what I think is the first half of the series. I can't remember how many episodes it's going to be.
Yeah, I want to say 9, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll have when we know we're at the halfway point, both of us mutually, we'll have the conversation then. But I've been kind of like passively while I'm at work, rewatching series 8 of Doctor Who. That's the 12th Doctor's run, the beginning of the 12th Doctor's run, with Peter Capaldi. He's fun. He's my favorite of the Doctors. I'm enjoying it. Even watching it, kind of mostly listening, while I do, my day job. But that's really all I've had the time for. I've got some, time consuming personal stuff going on. So I haven't really been able to get into as much, even less so than normal.
Yeah. But, yeah, it's things more important than TV to deal with.
Yeah, if you haven't watched any Doctor Who, you're not really sure where to jump on. It's pretty easy to like get into because the series are only 12 episodes, or they're British, so they're series and not seasons. So it's only 12 episodes per season. Usually there might be a special, there might not be, depending on which season it is. But I think that the 12th Doctor's first season, so series 8, you could probably jump on from the first episode of the series and kind of like get a general idea of where the character is and kind of pick up from there. Even if you just watch his 2, I honestly, like I said, he's my favorite modern incarnation of the Doctor. Yeah, that's really all I've been getting into until I have the time to get in, catch up on The Last of Us. But before we get into the meat of the episode, this week's inspiration is a very generous 3.5 fingers of Dewar's White Label Scotch, because I underestimated how much was left in the bottle. And so I just took my glass and I just went to pour the rest of it. And then when I saw how much was in the glass, I saw that it was too much. So this is all I'm going to have until I go to bed.
Great. You know what that's kind of like? It's like, let's say you're out at a restaurant and you're ordering some chicken wings and you got an option between, do I want to just get 3 wings? Do I want half a dozen? You know what? Maybe I'll get 8 wings and treat myself. I'm hungry. And then you get to wing number 7. You're like, oh, I am stuffed. I can't eat anymore. and then you see that last lonely wing on the plate, and you're like,
You can't leave it.
It would be a waste to box up a single wing. And so, yeah, you just enjoy the bonus alcohol that you have. I myself have this very fine, very exclusive glass of Trader Joe's Kentucky bourbon, which it's hard for me to get a read on because with something like Costco Kirkland brands, there's that myth of, all their Kirkland brand vodka is actually really, really top shelf, high quality vodka. So you can save money by getting that, even though, all vodka tastes the same anyway. So it's hard for me to classify where this bourbon sits relative to like name brand ones. But bottom line is it's pretty good.
Yeah, I've only gotten the the Trader Joe's branded liquors once. I actually have some in the house right now. It's their spiced rum, and I did some similar research into there as I did with Kirkland, because I was like, what's up with Kirkland whiskey? Like, where is it from? And the closest conclusion I was able to find for both is they take surplus from different places, but they also have like their own individual sources from smaller places that don't have the distribution reach. And they kind of like, they work out deals of like, hey, we're going to put our label on this, but it's your stuff. You can it'll be your label within your distribution range. Anything beyond that, it'll be Trader Joe's or Kirkland. So, but they don't. Costco especially is very tight-lipped about where they get it from, because it does vary depending on the year, because again, it's largely surplus from other companies. So if you're curious, no one has any answers for you unless you work very high up in Kirkland's corporate structure and can get the deets. Feel free to send those over. I promise I'll keep it to myself.
Yeah, if you have the executive power to increase the cost of the Costco hot dog, you probably also know where they source their Kirkland alcohol from.
All right, let's get into our first story, which is, it turns out, posted right after we recorded last week's episode. Like literally between recording the episode and finishing the edit, or like getting it ready to publish, DC released a short video, not even 6 minutes long, of James Gunn talking about the upcoming DC Universe film and television projects. And one of our listeners, Kokinnon, proposed we call this segment NP Addendum. So let us know if you like the name or not. We can't take any more suggestions from Kokinnon, otherwise we're going to start cutting him a check. If you recall from a couple weeks ago, I referred to Kokinnon as our associate editor, because he keeps catching stuff that Charlie and I miss because we're a second-rate operation over here.
No, but it's like a charming underdog Oliver Twist kind of second rate. It's endearing when you really think about it.
All right, so we're just going to go over each of the projects that were announced in this plan. I've separated it into 3 sections. There's the existing projects. There's the Elseworlds projects, which is the shortest section. It's 4 sections. The existing projects, the Elseworlds, the TV projects, and the upcoming movies. So we're going to start. Actually, let's start with the Elseworlds. These, since it's the shortest section, these are titles like The Batman, Matt Reeves' The Batman 2, which is slated to come out in, I believe, 2024. Joker, the Todd Phillips Joker sequel, the television series Teen Titans Go. It's an animated show. It's been running on Cartoon Network for a couple years now, and they've got 2 movies, and they've got some like other specials and stuff. And those things like that are still going to be able to exist, and they'll exist in this under this other imprint similar to the comics called Elseworlds. Now, Elseworlds is a title given out to out-of-continuity stories in DC Comics, which started retroactively in, I believe, 1992 with Gotham by Gaslight, which is a story that sets Batman in the late 19th century, and Jack the Ripper. The Jack the Ripper murders have happened in the UK, and they begin to happen. Similar murders start happening in Gotham, which is canonically in the Northeast United States around, the New York, New Jersey area. And ever since then, that's the imprint that DC has used. It was retroactively made in Elseworlds after another story was out of continuity story was published a year or two later. But that's how they were handling these one-off out of continuity stories for the 90s and most of the 2000s. So they were things that don't really influence the main universe, but can use the characters in different settings and things like that. So I think it's really cool that projects like this will still be allowed to exist without having to be tied directly.
Yeah. So I watched the video that James Gunn was kind of like debuting all these projects in as well. And the thing that has me surprisingly excited about superhero properties coming out is he explicitly said he wanted the story and voice of creators to come out, which is something I feel strongly about, kind of why Marvel is, I don't know, getting on my nerves so much. Is it's a machine that doesn't necessarily crush the creativity of whoever is leading any given movie, but there's like a certain homogenous look that all the movies need to have, just so viewers, kind of know that like they're seeing a Marvel movie. And conversely, now you have James Gunn saying, we're going to steer into different people having different styles of representing these properties. So being able to preserve something like the Batman or Joker, which were stylistically very different from most Marvel movies we've seen, why I like them so much more. It's good to see they're preserving that, and also hopefully maintaining that sort of mentality with like their mainline movies where everything's connected.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely, I think James Gunn is one of those people that it's notably his films in the MCU, the two Guardians of the Galaxy films, do look and feel very different from the other films surrounding them. And even he was able to write the Guardian scenes in Infinity War. So all the scenes that the Guardians of the Galaxy are in were at least partially written by James Gunn to maintain the tone and feel of the characters that he introduced, which I think is he's very aware and very cognizant of the impact that having a consistent creative voice has without necessarily needing to homogenize everything, which is why I think there are scenes in Avengers Infinity War that stand out because of how they're written, because those are the scenes that he wrote, or at least co-wrote. And you kind of see that with, we'll get it. This is a good lead into the next section, to the first section, the existing projects. So the existing projects that were in production before James Gunn and Peter Safran took over as the creative leads of the DC films and television universe are Shazam 2, Wrath of the Gods, Aquaman 2, which I'm sure has a subtitle, but I don't know what it is, Blue Beetle, and The Flash. So looking at those four films, so we know that James Wan directed the first Aquaman. He was which was interesting at the time because James Wan is largely a horror director.
Yeah, he did the Conjuring movies, I think.
Yeah, he did at least both the Conjuring movies. He did Insidious, Malignant. He directed the first Saw. So that was an interesting pick, and I think that there are Aquaman, I think, is an underrated entry into the superhero film universe. You can fight me on it if you want. I think that Aquaman is solid, and it definitely has a very distinct look. I think the way that they approach the underwater stuff was generally pretty dynamic, and then there are definitely you get to see elements of his horror directing style during one particular scene in the third act that I think works really well. And there's a very different sense of scale and wonder in Aquaman that really differentiates it from Aquaman's previous appearance in
Justice League.
In Justice League. Yes, thank you. And same with Shazam. So Shazam, I forget who directed the first Shazam, but the first Shazam is one of my favorite superhero movies. Just in general, that movie is very fun. It has a very like interesting approach and like a very cool look. David F. Sandberg is the director, and he's got a pretty broad career. He actually related to James Wan. He directed Annabelle, which was a spinoff of the Conjuring series. And he also has a largely horror-based background. But there's a very energetic, fun element to how Shazam is acted and directed. And the fact that those two have that element, like very clearly, that sets them apart, even from, the other successful films in the DC universe, like Man of Steel, as controversial as it is, it was fairly successful. And then Wonder Woman was very well received when it came out. There's a general positive idea, like feeling around Zack Snyder's Justice League versus the theatrical release. But like those two films in particular really stand out, both among the DC movies and even, I would argue, like among the Marvel films, because they are kind of doing their own thing and are kind of nebulously set in the same universe that, Man of Steel, BVS, and Justice League take place in. But the other two interesting ones that were in development before they took over and are still happening are Blue Beetle, which is an interesting pick because I feel like a lot of people aren't familiar with the character. I'm a big Blue Beetle fan. Honestly, all three primary versions of the character, which I hope we'll see all three of them represented to some degree in the upcoming film. The film is coming out later this year, or either later this year or early next year. Is going to focus around the third iteration of the character, Jaime Reyes. And he's just a very interesting character. I think he has a lot of potential to be kind of the Spider-Man of the DC universe, in that he's a young character kind of dealing with this dual identity and also like the complications of having this power he doesn't really understand and standing among other individuals who are more familiar, like more sure of their place in the world because they're adults. They've grown up with their powers or like grown up with the lifestyle of being a superhero. And I think he could offer a really interesting perspective.
Yeah, this one, I'm more bearish on this because this is one of the movies that was kind of like set in motion before James Gunn was taking over. One of the things we'll get into as we start talking about like the less well-known properties that he's helming is like no one really knew about Guardians of the Galaxy when they came out. And now, every kid wants their own personal Groot, right? Because of the personality he put into all the characters. So Blue Beetle, haven't heard anything about it. That makes me think I'd be into it. But they were working on it before the mix up with the, whoever was creatively leading the DC universe. So I'm not too sure about this one, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm fingers crossed that this one turns out well, because I do think that this character has a lot of potential. Especially if I find out that there have been some like reshoots between the takeover, like the shift change in hands to the release, that would inspire some additional hope. But this one kept going and Backroll didn't. So I don't know how to feel about that. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But I've seen some set photos and I really like the direction of the costume in camera. So it'll be really interesting to see like kind of what happens. We'll definitely get a trailer around Comic-Con this year, if I had to guess, if not sooner. So the big one of the pre-existing projects is The Flash. I think we talked briefly about The Flash a couple months ago, but this one is the really interesting one. I think that the future of the DC Universe franchise as it exists right now and as it's going to in the near future must really pivot on the story of The Flash, because even if you're only passively aware of like what's going on, Ezra Miller, the actor who plays Barry Allen in these films, has
been up to some stuff.
Yeah, they've definitely,
to put it lightly.
Yeah, they've been getting into some stuff, and Warner Brothers seems to really be holding on. Like, they've pushed back the film, I believe, 3 times officially. I'm sure one of those was because of COVID, but it had been pushed back already, even, before then. And it's finally going to be coming out later this year. And I just have to believe that it's so impactful for like setting up the universe as it's going to continue that they can't really work around it at this point.
Yeah. So something that was mentioned in the announcement video was how the Flash's movie, something happening in it, resets the DC universe, which makes me think maybe that ties into why they have so many less well-known characters like prominently leading in with this new push they have with the TV and movies. So yeah, I don't know what to think. I like the portrayal of the Flash, but also actors have done a lot less and had their movies shelved for, smaller reasons.
Yeah. But on the flip side, actors have done a lot more and still been okay. So I don't know. It seems like no matter what happens, a lot of early indications seem to be pointing in the direction of Ezra Miller not continuing as the Flash following this film. And we'll see kind of where that happens, especially considering that there was no Justice League announcement and no indication of any Flash involvement in this first slate. I don't know. I think it's interesting. We're probably not going to see Ezra Miller as the Flash after this film. And, I'm fine with that. Getting into television. So he also announced several television projects. Before we get into the individual titles, a thing that I thought was really interesting in this announcement is he said that the plan was to have both animated and live action features, both on television and in film. And the plan is to cast the same person for both. So, for example, the first title announced is called Creature Commandos. And this is it's a pretty obscure team, very similar to how he introduced Guardians of the Galaxy to the MCU. The Creature Commandos are a group of supernatural, lesser known beings. Though one of them is the DC Comics version of Frankenstein's monster. But it's a group of supernatural beings that just kind of handle more supernatural elements. And that's going to be an animated series. And the intent is whoever they cast for the voices of those characters will also be portraying those characters if and when they appear in live action. Which I think is a very interesting approach to have the cohesiveness of a shared universe, but also take advantage of the reduced limitations of animation as a medium.
Yeah, I agree with that too. In the video, again, going back to the video, they're working off of an 8 to 10 year timeline for stuff that they're going to put out. So you have to imagine that anything they're doing now, they're also thinking in 10 years, where will this given character end up? Assuming everything works out the way that we want it to. So the fact that they're going for the consistency of, for any given animated series, we're going to have the same person doing the voices and the real life action for the same character is yet another positive sign. It's the first time that a studio is taking an interconnected universe seriously outside of Marvel.
Yeah, I do think that on that point, I do kind of feel it had to be done by someone successfully first before it could be that idea could be taken to the next level. And not saying that I'm banking my chances on the DC universe going forward being that next level, but I do think that this is a good, a solid start of, okay, we want to approach this in different mediums, primarily, film and serialized short form, since television's a different monster now. And we're going to use different mediums, but it's going to be consistent all the way across. And when it's not consistent with this, we'll tell you it'll be this thing. Like those can still happen. It'll be that thing, but we're going to handle it the way we're going to handle it. And I think that where we are now with like people are familiar with the idea of a cohesive universe. I feel like people on the creative and business side of it are more familiar with the structure. And as an audience, we're like already primed for like the idea of like multiple timelines and things out of continuity, and the multiverse is like just a term that gets thrown around all the time now. So I think like we're in a position where I think all three of those things are finally kind of overlapping in a way that could work out to a successful formula.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for the first announcement of like a canonical serialized superhero podcast. But, we'll see. I'm not going to rule it out.
All right. To get to the other television projects, there's Waller, which I think it's very interesting that Viola Davis as Amanda Waller is one of the elements being kept. Not that I'm complaining. Viola Davis is great. She actually just got an EGOT this weekend. She completed the EGOT this weekend, getting a Grammy for a song that she did in, I believe, The Woman King. So shout out to Viola Davis. I think there are 22 people, herself, like her included, who have EGOTs. So it's a very cool accomplishment. But anyway, it does make sense that she's being kept on. I feel like she was one of the better elements, however brief her, role was in the first Suicide Squad film. Like that was a great casting decision. I think all the scenes that she was in were like some of the highlights of the film. And so it was very cool to see her brought back for The Suicide Squad by James Gunn. Even better than she was in the first one. But since then, she has appeared in
she was
Peacemaker, the series.
Yeah, for just a couple scenes.
And she also appears in the first 10 minutes of Black Adam. So, Black Adam, RIP. We're not going to talk about it because I'll get mad about it again. But I think like she's a connective element in like, and I feel like she can serve a similar connective element role that Nick Fury did in phase 1 of the MCU, appearing in basically every film in the first phase and a half of the MCU, and being this connective tissue through S.H.I.E.L.D. I don't know. I would guess that there's going to be an official name for the organization that Amanda Waller works for that comes up in this. She kind of nebulously works for the government as of right now, but there are several organizations she's been associated with in the comics, notably like Argus and Checkmate. Argus being more recently the government organization that oversees the Suicide Squad, which like obviously has already been seated considering she put together both of those teams in the movies already. So I'm glad that she's being kept on. Of the actors that could be kept on, I think she's a solid choice. She's obviously a really great actor, and she enjoys the role. So I'm glad to have her on for as long as she'll stick with it. From what James Gunn said in the presentation, Waller the series is going to kind of serve as going to be related to Peacemaker. We're getting a Peacemaker season 2, but Waller is going to serve in the interim, either as a prequel or like in between seasons 1 and 2, because there are going to be some cast members established in the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker that are going to appear alongside Viola Davis in her solo series. So it'll be interesting to see how all that connects. I'm glad that Peacemaker gets to keep happening as well under this current plan.
Yeah, it was interesting they didn't highlight that in this plan, but I assume it's just going on in parallel with all this.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of scheduling stuff going on. Like John Cena's pretty active, and he's great. I'm glad he's sticking around. James Gunn clearly has a lot of love for that type of storytelling, like that kind of we're taking this seriously, but we're also having fun with it. I think is a good way to kind of describe James Gunn's style with superhero movies he's worked on.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the next TV project is Lanterns. I really wish this were a movie. I'm a huge Green Lantern fan. Green Lantern is probably, if not, number one, probably number two favorite superhero, like as a concept. We, 12 years ago, we got the Ryan Reynolds live action film that is not good. Very few redeeming qualities. I think that probably one of the only redeeming qualities is Mark Strong as Sinestro, which we're not going to get again because Mark Strong played Dr. Savannah in the first Shazam. He'll probably make an appearance, at least in the second one. It kind of, just in concept of, you have this device that can create anything you imagine in the form of like this hard light projection, kind of says to me, we need a movie scale budget to do this consistently.
Yeah, that makes me think that they're going to lean really heavily on just kind of like psychological components or something, because James Gunn made an association with it'll be like True Detective, and that was a real like head scratcher of like, okay, interesting. It's not what I was expecting. Let's see what we're going to do with this.
Yeah, I mean, the Green Lantern Corps is a universe spanning intergalactic peacekeeping organization. Like, they are space cops. And the characters that the series is going to focus on, Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart, are the two most prominent members of the Green Lantern Corps across multiple continuities. So I'm sure that like they're going to tell an interesting story. I'm just worried about it being fully realized visually. That's my only concern, is like, how are you going to do constructs? How much space stuff is going to happen if, it's on a TV budget, even if it is HBO Max, like they've done some impressive stuff in live action. But even still, it just it's one of the things that was like, I wish this were a film, but I really like the characters. James Gunn, like, I'll get into it later when talking about Superman, but like, James Gunn reads comics. He like takes the source material very seriously. He knows what he can he seems to have a good eye for picking things that work, even if he has to change like some of the surface level elements. Like a lot of the Guardians characters are very different from their comic book versions, but still work in the universe that he, kind of created around them. So I'm not like worried. I just wish it were on the scale that I've been imagining since I was, a teenager. The next series is Booster Gold. No notes, solid choice. Honestly, like, if you just look up anything Booster Gold, there's a good chance that like you can get a feel for who Booster Gold is as a character. The broad strokes of it are, he's from the future. He is the dude who peaked in high school as his high school's quarterback. Didn't do anything with his life afterwards. Stole some technology from the museum that he was a janitor at, and then came back to the 21st century to be a superhero with this futuristic technology. And he's like the most like, at least at first on the surface, is the most like shameless, capitalistic, like, I'm straight up a superhero to be famous. Like, taking Tony, the MCU's Iron Man to like the furthest extension of like, what if you were just in it for glory, period. There's a very good Smallville episode focused around Booster Gold that if you haven't seen any of Smallville, you could watch this Booster Gold episode and you're not going to get spoiled for most of what's going on in Smallville, but you'll get an absolutely perfect overview of like who Booster Gold is. It's very good. I'm really looking forward to that one. It's going to be fun. I can tell you, sight unseen, no other details, Booster Gold is going to be fun.
Yeah.
Even if it's not good.
Of everything on this entire list, this is the thing that I am like most excited about. Like, I will probably actually watch this and probably nothing else. But this sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, the last TV project that was announced is Paradise Lost. So this is going to be set on Paradise Island, also known as Themyscira, the island that the Amazons come from. And it's going to be set before Diana being Wonder Woman, is born, created. I don't know. Some continuities have her being sculpted from clay by her mother, Hippolyta. Some continuities have her being born naturally. It depends on the continuity, but in any case, Paradise Lost is going to be set before Wonder Woman exists. It's probably, of the announced projects, the one I'm least interested in, but I do like things that incorporate Greek mythology, even though I'm not very well versed in different like world mythologies. I tend to enjoy things that have like those elements to them. You know, like I really enjoyed the God of War series. There are a handful of shows and movies that I've watched. I'm like, okay, well, this is fun. Like I recognize these archetypes. I recognize these characters because they've been present culturally. And so it'd be interesting to see like how those fit into how magic and mythology work in the DC universe. So I'll give this one a chance. It's just like, of the initial announcements, this was definitely one that I was like, all right, well, that's a choice. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for me, like everything that is like a character I recognize, I instantly am just kind of like turned off by. Maybe it's because I've been burned by like all the other DC stuff that's come out.
Yeah.
But, you know, this one I'm probably just, you know, not really going to pay any attention to.
So that's all the TV projects. So the last section is going to be the film projects. So like I said earlier, this first act of the revamped DC film universe is going to be called Gods and Monsters. And I think most of these projects all kind of lean towards that. So the big one, I think, in my opinion, the big one is Superman Legacy. It's going to be a Superman story that is definitively not an origin story. So sad as I am to see Henry Cavill go, I do trust James Gunn to pin a solid Superman story. Again, like I mentioned earlier, he reads comics. He's got good taste in the comics that he like references and has been like posting little like hints to. So I'm sure I'll like whatever we get. It'll be different, and hopefully it'll be different in a way that people connect to in a way they didn't connect to Man of Steel.
Yeah, other than that, there's like no word on what they're going to cover. So if anything, it gets points for being another like kind of wild card movie. But, you know, again, it being Superman rebooted once again for like the third time in kind of my, the time that I've been paying attention to movies, like seriously. It's like, honestly, I don't know. Whatever. We'll see.
The next film is Brave and the Bold, which is going to be focused around Batman and Robin, Bruce Wayne and his son, Damian Wayne, who is the technically fifth Robin. A lot of people will say fourth. Those people are Stephanie Brown haters, and I don't have any time for them. So that's going to be Batman and his son, Damian Wayne, as Robin. And the two reasons I'm excited for this particular project is, one, live action Robin, who's actually a child. It's never happened. Every version of Robin we've seen on screen has been, like, since the 40s, has been portrayed by an adult. And there's been like very little like effort to be like, yo, this is a boy or teenager that Bruce has taken in, from like the earlier 40s serials to the 60s series to, you know, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. It's always been, you know, it's Dick Grayson as Robin, and he's an adult, and that's it. We're not going to explain anything else. So I'm really interested in like the idea of actually having Robin as a child and exploring what that means to have like a child fighting crime alongside Batman. But the second reason I'm excited is this movie is titled Brave and the Bold.
Yeah, I thought that was like a cartoony adaptation of the Batman.
So there is a honestly very good series called Batman the Brave and the Bold, and that animated series' title and this film's title are inspired by a run of comics called The Brave and the Bold, where every month there would be two superheroes from across the DC universe paired up to tell a single story. Sometimes it would be, it might be one or two, maybe even 3 months in a row of the same story, but it was always, here's one, this month, this Brave and the Bold is going to be, Green Lantern and the Flash, or Blue Beetle and Superman, or Zatanna and Plastic Man. Like, there were these, every Brave and the Bold story was a team up between characters who either had their own books or were part of teams. It was a way to team up two sometimes like seemingly random characters together to tell a combined story with those characters. And so, hopefully, I would really like the idea of a Brave and the Bold film series where they use this as a way to like pair two heroes together and tell a story with those two characters. I think starting it with Batman and Robin is like a good way to kick it off if they choose to go in this direction. Obviously, I have no information, but they choose to go in that direction, starting with Batman and Robin, a pair of characters that we naturally associate with each other and like are already familiar with as a concept, and then using that to turn into like Batman and Robin can have continuing adventures in a Batman centered film series, but also have other things with like characters that maybe we don't know as well. So like other characters that James Gunn has teased on Twitter have been like Mr. Terrific and Plastic Man, which are like two relatively obscure characters for people who don't read comics. Very interesting in their own unique ways. I think like Brave and the Bold would be an interesting way to pair those two characters together in a film and be like, well, we know Brave and the Bold as a concept is we take two heroes, we put them together, we tell a story with them. So that's exciting potential for me as someone who's familiar with the concept.
Yeah, there's just so much going on with like not just that concept but everything, but like in the interest of time, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah. So the next one is another wildcard pick, I think, The Authority. So The Authority is a team from the Wildstorm comics, which is a side imprint from DC Comics in the 90s. And this team is largely composed of pastiches of other superheroes. Not necessarily just the Justice League. There are some also like, there's some Marvel analogs. Like every member of the team kind of represents a pastiche of an existing, more popular superhero. Most notably, Apollo, who's the Superman analog, and Midnighter, who's the Batman analog. So being direct pastiches of DC Comics characters, when DC fully folded the Wildstorm characters into DC Comics continuity, it created like this interesting dynamic that I feel was never fully taken advantage of. So it'll be interesting to see how that works in the film universe where Batman and Superman exist. And now there are these characters who were created as direct parallels to those two characters without all of like, the names and history baggage along with them. But now that they exist in the same universe, I think it'll be interesting to see how, like, what do you do with here's a character, and here's a character created explicitly to parody that character, essentially, and they exist right next to each other. Where does that go? I think that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, they're another big question mark in my head, so I'm cautiously optimistic about it.
Yeah, I'll do some. I've tracked down a lot of some Authority comics, and when the New 52 launched in 2011, they were kind of rebooted as a team called Stormwatch, and I have those as well. So by the time we have some updates on the Authority and it's relevant to talk about on this podcast, I'll have some comic knowledge to drop on top of that then. But moving on to the last two projects, which I have probably the least to say about, are Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which is presumably based on the Tom King miniseries of the same name. And honestly, so that just finished in October. It ran for, I believe, 8 issues over 2022. Phenomenal. Even if you're not a real comic book person, I would definitely recommend, honestly, grabbing anything by Tom King. But Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is a great story. It's visually very impressive. I forget the artist. I wish I'd looked it up before. But if they just directly adapt that, obviously they can't do page for page. It's like they're different mediums. But if they directly adapt that series, this is a easy home run.
Yeah, that's one where it's like Superman, I know about it, I don't care, and then your description is like, okay, maybe there's something going on with this one. I guess I'll just have to wait and see.
And then the last one is Swamp Thing. Now, we've already had a...
I mean, by the name alone, you have to just kind of wonder. You throw up your hands and go, what are they going to do with this?
Well, Swamp Thing already has a movie. There has been a Swamp Thing film before. And just recently, in the last 3 years, there was a Swamp Thing series. And I've seen Swamp Thing the movie, and it is a product of its time. I don't think it's bad, but it's definitely like they didn't have the means to do the special effects they wanted to do. The technology just didn't exist.
Yeah, they should have waited 14 years like James Cameron did with Avatar 2.
Yeah, the heart of it is there. I think Swamp Thing's an interesting character, even though I know the least about Swamp Thing I know less about Swamp Thing than I do about the Creature Commandos, and no one knows about the Creature Commandos. But there was a Swamp Thing series produced, I believe the first it came out in 2021, I think. But I haven't watched the entire series. From what I've seen, it looks pretty solid. And I think that with a film budget, it could be really cool. We never got the Guillermo del Toro Justice League Dark movie that was talked about probably 5-6 years ago. So hopefully between Swamp Thing and Creature Commandos, maybe we can get something that's up del Toro's alley in terms of like telling like a really interesting story with cool monsters, which is a thing that he has a decent amount of experience with. But that's all the projects that were announced in that particular video. Next up, we're going to go over to Charlie's interview for Children of the Mist, and we will see you on the other end.
I'm here with Diem, director of Children of the Mist. It has won the award for Best Directing from the International Documentary Film Festival Amsterdam and made the documentary feature film shortlist for the 95th Academy Awards. It is set to release on DVD and Blu-ray and digitally on Vudu, all on February 14th. Diem, thanks for joining us, and also congratulations on your awards.
Hi, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, it must be something that you're especially happy about too, given that this is your first feature film.
Yeah, exactly. It's my first feature film.
So what gave you the idea in the first place to document this practice of bridal kidnapping?
Actually, in 2017, and when I followed my friend to the northern Vietnam, and my friend from Hmong community, and they opened a little workshop for Hmong children in the north Vietnam, and I followed them, and the dad, he allowed to stay in their house, and when I follow Z and her friend, and they playing around in the village, and it's just reminded me about my childhood. And I start with the idea to make a film about the beautiful time of childhood. And my biggest questions is how our childhood can disappear. So I talked with my protagonist. I talked with Z, and she agreed me to bring the camera and follow her in 3 years. And in 2018, when I realized and when I heard about bride kidnapping in Hmong culture, and I started to fear a lot about my protagonist's future, because when I saw her growing up day by day, and I feel so scared. And when in 2019, when I filmed when she was bride kidnapping by the boy in the village, and I realized it's so strong, the scene so strong, and it somehow it can destroys my first idea. So I'm so scared, so that's why I tried to convince my producer to allow me to have more than 1 year to follow her in the high school and to find the end of the film. And when we sitting in the editing room, and I decided to tell a story about sadness and loneliness when we growing up. And and we try to make the film follow this idea, and not too much focus on bride kidnapping in Hmong culture, but happen with my protagonist, and somehow we have to deal with when we edit the film.
Yeah, I think a lot of that really comes out of the movie, especially in the first third or the first half, because the concept of being kidnapped sort of hangs over the movie as just sort of the specter of something that commonly happens to women in that part of Vietnam. But for the most part, it's just following Dee as a very young child and going to school, working in the field, playing with her friends. And it's not until one of the Lunar New Year festivals that she catches the interest and attention of a boy, which is when we get into some of the more serious content. So what I'm curious to ask you is, when you had finished collecting all of the footage and you went back to edit it, since you found that you could combine these two concepts of childhood and aging and losing one's sense of childhood with this practice of bridal kidnapping, did you want to put in some more shots of Dee's mother or other relatives talking about how they themselves had been kidnapped as kind of a way to foreshadow it possibly happening?
Yeah, we try. And when I film, I realized that life is not just black or white, and life have so much color. And we try to brings a lot of perspective, like the mom perspective, the dad perspective, and even the boy who tried to kidnap my protagonist. But we have it so much on the footage, and because everybody tried to talk about their perspective, about their life, about their emotions, and but finally when we we edit the films, we decide we have to follow Z and her story and her emotion and her perspective. So that's why we try to make everything little bit balanced with her story. And we try to. I try to make a film and try to listen as much as possible with a lot of the subjects in the film, but we try to keep it balanced. So somehow we can feel like the audiences want to know more about the protagonist's life. I want to know more about her mom and her dad, but like we have the duration of the film, so and I don't want to make it very long, like more than 2 hours of the film. So I just want to keep it short and balanced, and everyone can have their perspective in the film. So yeah, finally we choose to try to make the final version of the film.
One thing that I really liked about watching it is that with a lot of documentaries, you kind of have expert talking heads explaining to the audience exactly what they're supposed to feel about any given scene, and then sort of talking as a narrator over events that are happening. Whereas with this, it was all like very fly on the wall, like an omniscient camera hovering from one person to the next. And I thought it worked very naturalistically.
Yes.
Is that a style that you intentionally set out to film it with, or is that something that kind of evolved over time, given that you were following the same subject for multiple years?
Yeah. When it happened to my protagonist, I felt so scared, but I try to understand her parent feeling. So and I try to figure out what happened. So sometimes I get involved a little bit, and sometimes I just want to understand and try to listen. And so that's why in some scene, when I understand when Z or her mom talking with me, and I try to say out my perspective and my emotion, and I really want my protagonist, my little sister, she go back to school and continues studying, because I realized the only way for us to discover the world, to have much more opportunities in our life, is in the mountain of Vietnam. For the girls, they try to continue school. So when I filming and when I try to listen, try to understand, and try to talk with Z and her parent about my ideas and my feeling. So sometimes I really want to get involved in this process and stop it, but somehow I realize I cannot. So it's so hard to decide what I need to do in this situation. And I try my best, and somehow it's really confused, and somehow I realize I can do something for her for my protagonist. And it's happened. It's the mom also feel really hard and feels so confused when she had to decide what she can do, and it's the same with me, and we try to make our best for Z.
Yeah, I thought one interesting and then shocking turn of the movie is initially it kind of comes off as this bridal kidnapping tradition seems more consensual than expected, because as is seen in the movie, G and the boy walk off together as though they're just a couple. And then, sure, she doesn't come home immediately and her parents are panicking, but eventually she does return home along with the boy's family. And then they start to talk about terms of a dowry and, well, we want to make sure that D chooses to be married. We want to make sure that it's consensual between the both of them. And so initially you kind of think maybe it's not as bad as you think it is. But then in the climax of the movie, we see that even though she has refused multiple times to both the family and to the boy directly, I do not want to be married to you, she is forcefully carried off. And at that moment, I want to ask you, how are you feeling watching that happen? Because obviously you have to balance yourself as a documentarian, just capturing this happening on camera, but then also as a human being, seeing someone carried away against their will. It's obviously a terrible thing. So what was going through your head at the time?
Yeah, is when it happens, because the parent, they try to repair for me and for Z that the boy and his family will try to kidnap her again second times. But they prepare for us like what we need to do. Like they prepare for me that I have to help Z because they prefer me as their daughter. So in Hmong culture, there's only sister and brother can help the girl, like physically pull her back when the boy and the family try to kidnap her. And the mom and the dad said, I have to help Z when it happened, and I agree with the dad. And also with Z, her mom said, you have to say very politely with the boy, and that I don't want to get married. I want to back to school and blah, blah, blah. And the mom said, the mom don't want the hurt the boy feeling. So she tried to teach Z how to speak very politely with the boy and with the family. And the mom said, if the boy and the family try to kidnap Z again, Z had to cry very loudly and try to fight again. And then she had to say, and finally she had to say some very polite words to break up. And the parent prepare for us like in 1 week about that. But when it really truly happened, we so scared and I feel so scared, and I started to doubt everyone, and I didn't believe in the mom and the dad and everyone, and I feel so scared when it happened, and when they tried to pull her out of the house, because I hung my camera on my neck and I put it down and tried to pull her back by my hand, and but it's just only me trying to pull her back, and when the grandmom saw it, she tried to stop me, like she held me back and she said, stop it, yeah, and let it happen. And I feel so scared, and I don't know what to do in this situation, because I feel so hopeless and feel so useless. And I still keep my camera like this. I cannot thinking, and I like a statue. I just carry my camera like this and feel so scared, like I'm frozen. And when she told them help me, and I just like, oh my God, and I turned back and I saw her mom, and I say to her mom, come to help her and stop this kidnapping process. So when I called her the mom, and she came, and she decided to help Z and stop this, and they back to the house and drinking the breakup wine, and I was so scared, and it's happened with Z too. She was so scared too, and we and and when I realized when she was safe, and I feel so angry and with her and her parents too, and everyone too, and close my camera and I called my friend came to pick me up and back to Hanoi and back to the capital, and I didn't come back to the house in 6 months because I feel so angry, and Z feels so angry with me too because she thought that I didn't do anything to help her, and I just let the people kidnap her again, and I feel so angry about this, but like when I feel calm down, and I back to and I decided back to the village and have we have a really long talk near the fireplace and talk out of our feeling about this. So it's okay now, and she doing very well, and it's really scary when it happens.
Yeah, it's a very raw scene to watch on camera. You kind of want to reach through the screen and try to help her as you're seeing it. And I thought that this leads into the very end of the movie and one of the last lines that G speaks, and it connects with the theme that you were trying to get across in the first place with the movie about childhood and losing one's sense of being a child. And her exact quote is, "I wish I could be a child again." And after going through such a traumatic experience, there's truly no going back.
Yes, because when I realized she already become a independent girl, and that's why I decided to stop filming, and I told with her this is the last scene of the film, and I want to back to the rock, the mountains with her when we were a kid and we're playing around, and it will be the end of the film, and I will not follow her anymore in the future. So it's the last day I film her. So we film it in the afternoon. It's near the end of the day, and it's so emotional with me and with Z because we know that will be the end of the film. I will not follow her anymore, and she had to walk by her own feeling and herself. So somehow we want to back to our childhood with very freedoms, with the beautiful childhood freedom, but we have to growing up. We cannot back to our childhood in person, but by the film somehow. But is the feeling is so sadness and loneliness. We have so many friends, but when we growing up, our friend from childhood, we have no one by our side, and we have to walk to future with ourselves and have to face with all the problem and loneliness of adulthood. So, I want to tell this feeling. So she feels the same with me and have the same feelings, and
Yeah, it was incredible. I loved it. So thank you for making it. So that's Children of the Mist. It's going to be available February 14th. Thanks again, Diem, and congratulations again on all the awards. I look forward to whatever comes next.
Thank you so much for spending your time. Yes.
And we're back. Last up, this week is an update on Netflix's password sharing plans.
Yeah, so we talked about this 2 episodes ago, I think. Netflix has been testing a paid upsell for password sharing in South America. Apparently, sharing passwords is rampant down there, and I don't know. How could it be worse than up here? Because again, everyone I know is either mooching off of someone's account or is themselves sharing their account. I think you and I both, exemplify both of those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Netflix estimates that just about 100 million subscribers worldwide share passwords. So that's a lot of potential money they're leaving on the table by not acting on it. Starting this March, they were set to restrict accounts in the US unless they logged in from a home Wi-Fi network at least once per month. And once this was announced, the backlash online was so strong that it caused Netflix to walk back this rule. And they claimed that it was posted in error, quote unquote. That's something that I will never, ever believe any company ever saying about anything. But I think they're just trying to save face on it. They said, we posted it on accident. It's rules that only apply to our South American customers. Wink, wink.
Yeah, it's the man, this is gonna age us, but it's like it's like being on AIM and being like, hey, I really like you, and I think you're like cute or whatever, and then being like, oh, that was my friend, I didn't mean it, after you didn't get a response for like 10 minutes. Maybe that's just an experience that I had, but
you know what, the people going through having to actually type that out, those people are our age or older now. So they're the ones in charge of trying to run damage control on these sorts of campaigns and rollouts. So it makes total sense that they would run that exact same strategy of, no, guys, it was just an accident. We didn't mean it. We have to manage subscriptions for almost 250 million people worldwide. So we apologize for erroneously proposing such a ridiculous policy that no, we would never actually try and pull this on you. No, but seriously, are you guys interested in password sharing and paying for that privilege? But in the same survey, or I'm going to have to cut that. At the same time, there was a survey run by a Wall Street firm, Jefferies. It found that of people who do share passwords, this is people who use other customers' passwords to watch Netflix for free. 62% of those people would not pay to actually get their own account if they suddenly lost access. And while that does sound like a lot, almost 2/3 of people getting free Netflix would not suddenly pay for Netflix if their access was cut off. I think that's really, really, really positive news for Netflix, because that tells you that 38% of people would consider paying for Netflix if they suddenly didn't have it anymore.
That's a legitimately huge chunk.
Yeah, so 100 million people sharing passwords, implying that there's another 100 million people, probably more, who would not pay. So take almost 40% of that, and suddenly you have 40 million more subscribers. That's an absolutely obscene number. And granted, a bunch of those are probably like families, such as myself, who are mooching off of their parents' Netflix account. And, the parents would just pay for like the upsell, like a few dollars added on to their monthly subscription costs. It wouldn't be exactly the same as someone getting for a brand new subscription. But yeah, there's plenty of broken up couples out there where the guy or the girl they're still watching the account that their significant other happened to leave logged in on their computer.
Well, you got a profile, you got your list still. You're not going to remake it.
Yeah, everything's personalized on Netflix. You don't want to have to start that over from scratch.
Yeah, I mean, like even like it's like from my perspective. So I'm the member of my family paying for Netflix, and
you're doing God's work, sir.
But even like the idea of going from $15 a month to $20 isn't honestly that big of a jump if it means that like we all get to still watch Netflix from our homes. It's like I feel like a lot of people are doing that same math, and you're retaining more users by maybe doing so as it exists right now, I can have multiple profiles watching Netflix at the same time in different locations for I believe like $15 a month. And so someone going from $15 a month to $20 a month is probably more likely, like for like in like a family house, like family situation, or like like a shared friend group, even is probably more likely than someone going from, hey, if you want to keep access to your profile, you have to have your own $10 a month profile, account. I feel like fewer people are going to do that, and even though it's on paper, like that's 50% less that you're getting from that same account. I think there's more retention on those people willing to pay an additional $5 than there is people who are willing to go from 0 to 10.
Yeah. And then from that same survey, 40% of the respondents would consider paying for an ad-supported tier, which, as we've talked about multiple times before, Netflix is planning on rolling out sometime later this year. So it's not even necessarily going from 0 to the full price subscription tier. It's 0 to whatever
$4.99 probably.
Yeah, whatever price Netflix is going to set their ad-supported tier out.
Right. And like there are already streaming services that are doing that. Like Peacock has an ad-supported tier. Paramount Plus has an ad-supported tier.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Disney Plus is also going to roll out an ad-supported one.
Yeah, if they haven't already, Disney Plus is definitely planning on doing so. I don't know about HBO Max. I'm sure that they've also at least talked about it, like publicly, but I don't know if they have any specific plans to switch over to that. If they haven't already, I could just be slightly out of touch.
Yeah, you go ahead.
But like, it does seem like as big a deal as it was when that like model was announced. Like Netflix did it first. They're like, we're gonna have an ad-supported tier. It'll be $5 a month. You just gotta watch ads sometimes. And if you don't want to have ads and you pay, $12. That was like a huge deal when it was announced. And like people were like, oh yeah, I would never do that. But like reasonably, most people don't have a problem watching ads occasionally. YouTube, like YouTube as an example, is free and has a considerable amount of ads if you're watching it for free. And I just happen to be in a group of people who is like, in the same way that I'm paying for Netflix for my family, my dad is paying for YouTube Premium, like the family plan, so that none of us have to watch YouTube ads. So like, that's definitely still good. Like people who don't want to deal with ads are going to do what it takes to not have ads, but a lot of people don't mind it because it is what it is. We're used to being advertised to all the time. I think now, like, 2 years after that initial announcement of like, hey, we're going to have an ad supported tier to see if people are into it, and like actually rolling it out in different regions, I think it's a lot more realistic now than maybe it felt as Americans 2 years ago to hear that same thing.
Of course, there's always going to be an outcry of this thing that I like is going to get handicapped in some kind of way, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not really that big of a change. And also, I kind of feel like all these streaming services debuting ad-supported tiers is kind of like a wild card and a chance for certain underdog services to overtake their competitors. Because when you think about it, there is a good way to do ads. And by example, with coming up this weekend, I think there's the Super Bowl. And what is the joke that everyone always says? Like, oh, I don't really care about football. I just watch it for the ads, because companies spend insane amounts of money to create legitimately good ads. So these companies who know everything about your type of TV and movie preference, perhaps they're in a position to be able to serve more relevant and more engaging ads on like a single user level, to the point where getting the ad supported tier is really not that big of a deal at all.
Yeah, I honestly hadn't thought about that, but we should have that discussion in a later episode, because I think that's a really interesting point, like using the Super Bowl as a point of reference. I think that's a really interesting point for like where ad supported content, like streaming, platforms could go. So we should definitely have that conversation. Write that down so we actually have that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, ads are annoying because that much thought isn't really put into doing ads, but there is a point where they are like really good.
Yeah, because, television has had to adapt to a primarily streaming landscape. And I think advertising in general seems to be behind the curve. A lot of the advertising we see on streaming services is like, for example, like Amazon Prime and HBO. Even if you're paying for, the ad-free version of that experience, you do still get pre-roll ads of other content on that service. Like you specifically with those two. Prime Video shows you, hey, here's a random thing here's a thing that Prime Video is producing that's going to be coming up or came out recently. We're going to show you 30 seconds of advertising for it before you watch 6 episodes in a row, whatever you're about to watch. HBO Max is the same thing. When I watched, The Last of Us last week, before it was a minute, like a 90-second, which I could have skipped, but there was a 90-second pre-roll ad that was, here's a bunch of different programs that HBO Max has either out right now or coming out in the next couple weeks or months that we just want to make you aware of. So like that's like the best, that's as good as it gets for like ads on streaming. Otherwise it's just like if you watch Hulu or without like with ads, you're just seeing TV commercials. So I think like there is an evolution of advertisements adjusting to the type of content we're used to seeing adapted for streaming. So I think that's a discussion worth having, I think.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, ads exist to inform you about a product that you didn't know you wanted. And the best possible ad is you whipping out your wallet the second the ad is over and thinking, I got to buy this thing right now. I want to be mind controlled into spending money. These companies just have to do it for me. But I won't say anything else about it. That's definitely a good longer discussion that we should have.
Yeah. But in the interest of time, that's going to wrap us up for this week. You can find links to these articles in the show notes and at MediaPlayNews.com. You can subscribe to the site's mailing list using the subscription link in the notes. You can email us directly at MediaPlayNewsPodcast@gmail.com to have your comment featured on the show, or find us on our new Twitter account at PodcastMPN. If you like the show, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. We really appreciate it. I'm Charles Parkman.
I'm Charlie Sholey.
And we will see you next week.
Oof. Monster episode. Have fun, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna... Oof.